Los Angeles, November 1971. A professional arm wrestling table, imported Swedish oak, designed to withstand thousands of pounds of force, sat center stage at the International Strength Athletes Exhibition. 11,000 people watched as two figures sat down on opposite sides. On the left, Margaret the Mountain O'Brien, 260 pounds of pure genetic power, world champion, 7 consecutive years undefeated, over 200 victories, never lost, not once. On the right, Bruce Lee, 140 pounds, shirtless, calm, a movie star who had wandered into the wrong arena. The size difference was absurd. Her arm, 19 inches around the bicep, looked like a tree trunk next to his. When they gripped hands, hers completely swallowed his. The referee said go. 4 seconds later, the table exploded. Not cracked, not damaged, exploded. Split down the middle with a sound like a gunshot. Both fighters fell forward, still gripping each other's hands, landing on the shattered remains of what had been a $1,200 professional-grade table. The crowd went silent, then erupted into chaos, because in 50 years of competitive arm wrestling across 40 countries involving thousands of matches, no one had ever broken a table. Engineers would later calculate the force required, over 4,000 pounds of pressure. Neither competitor could generate that alone, but together they created something impossible. This is the story of the day physics met philosophy, and the table died proving it. November 1971, Los Angeles. The sports arena was packed, not for basketball, not for boxing, but for something rarer, the International Strength Athletes Exhibition. This wasn't your typical sports event. It was a showcase, a carnival of human power. Powerlifters deadlifting 800 pounds, strongmen bending steel bars, grip strength specialists crushing beer cans with one hand, and in the center ring, the main attraction, arm wrestling. Professional arm wrestling in 1971 wasn't what it is today. No ESPN coverage, no million-dollar sponsorships, just raw competition, traveling exhibitions, and a small community of people obsessed with one question: who has the strongest arm on the planet? For 7 years, the answer had been the same: Margaret the Mountain O'Brien. She wasn't called the Mountain because of her height. She was 5'9", average for a woman. She was called the Mountain because when you sat across from her at an arm wrestling table, that's what it felt like. Immovable, unshakable, inevitable. 260 pounds, not fat, muscle, dense, functional, terrifying muscle. Her right arm measured 19 inches around the bicep. For context, most adult men measure 13 to 15 inches. Professional bodybuilders measure 17 to 18. Margaret measured 19, and it wasn't for show. It was for crushing opponents. She could curl 185 pounds for reps. She could bench press 315. And when she locked her arm in the starting position, it felt, according to every opponent who ever faced her, like trying to move a car. Margaret had started arm wrestling at age 19, almost by accident. She'd been working construction, one of the few jobs that didn't care if you were a woman, as long as you could do the work. One day during lunch break, the guys were arm wrestling, betting money, talking trash. One of them saw her and laughed. "Hey, Margaret, you want to try?" She did. She beat all 12 of them without breaking a sweat. Word spread. Someone invited her to a local competition. She won. Then a regional. Won that too. Then nationals. Won. Then worlds. By 1971, she'd defended her world title 7 times, beaten over 200 opponents. Men, women, didn't matter. Nobody could move her arm. The sports journalists called her the strongest woman alive, and nobody had evidence to dispute it. That November night in Los Angeles, she was the headliner. The crowd came to see her, to watch her obliterate whoever was brave enough to sit across from her. But the match everyone would remember, the one that would make headlines and confuse engineers for decades, that match happened by accident. Bruce Lee wasn't supposed to be there. He had no interest in arm wrestling, no interest in strongman competitions. He was there for one reason, supporting a friend. Dave was a powerlifter, a good one. He was competing in the deadlift event that night, and Bruce had promised to watch. Between events, Bruce stood near the arm wrestling stage, waiting for Dave's turn. He was wearing black pants, a simple shirt, just another face in the crowd. But a journalist recognized him. "Bruce Lee, is that you?" Bruce smiled politely. "Yes." "What are you doing here? Are you competing?" "No, just watching a friend, supporting him." The journalist saw an opportunity, an interview with Bruce Lee at a strength exhibition, perfect human interest angle. "Can I ask you a few questions about your upcoming film?" Bruce agreed. They stood near the stage, talking about the way of the dragon, about fight choreography, about the difference between movie combat and real combat. And that's when Marguerite walked by. She just finished obliterating another challenger, some cocky bodybuilder who thought his 18-inch arms would be enough. It wasn't. She'd pinned him in 3 seconds. She was walking off stage, toweling sweat from her neck, when she heard Bruce's name. She stopped, turned, looked. A small Asian man, maybe 5'7", lean, looked like he weighed, 140 pounds? And people were crowding around him like he was somebody important. Marguerite walked over, curious, not hostile, just genuinely curious. "You're a movie star?" she asked, extending her massive hand. Bruce shook it. Her grip was firm, controlled, the grip of someone who knew exactly how strong they were and didn't need to prove it. "I make films, yes, action films, martial arts." Marguerite smiled, not mocking, but amused. "With that frame? You must use a lot of camera tricks. No offense, but you look like you weigh about 140 pounds soaking wet." Bruce smiled back. He'd heard this 1,000 times. "I weigh exactly 140. You're very accurate. And yes, I use some camera techniques, but most of what you see is real technique, applied with maximum efficiency." The journalist, sensing gold, interrupted. "Marguerite, would you arm wrestle Bruce? You know, world champion versus movie star? Make great photos." Marguerite laughed. "I'd hurt him. I outweigh him by 120 pounds. I just beat the Soviet champion last month. This isn't even fair." Bruce remained calm. "I appreciate your consideration, but I'd be interested in trying, if you're willing. I understand you'll likely win based on raw strength, but I'm curious about the technical aspects." Marguerite studied him. She'd arm wrestled hundreds of people. Most came with ego, with bravado, with something to prove. This guy? He was just curious, genuinely curious. "All right," she said finally, "but we stop immediately if I feel your arm about to break. I've injured people before accidentally. I don't want that on my conscience." Bruce agreed, and within minutes, the exhibition organizers had cleared the stage. Word spread fast. Marguerite's arm wrestling Bruce Lee, the movie star, the little guy. The crowd converged. Everyone wanted to see the mismatch. They sat down at the official table. The size difference was immediately, absurdly, comically apparent. Margaret's arm looked like it belonged to a different species, thick, veined, powerful. Bruce's arm looked normal, athletic, yes, defined, sure, but normal. When they clasped hands, her hand completely engulfed his. The referee, a professional judge who'd officiated hundreds of matches, positioned their elbows on the pads. Standard rules apply. No fouls, no lifting elbows. Ready positions. Margaret set her shoulder, locked her structure, applied about 30% of her strength just to establish control. She'd learned through experience to start conservatively with smaller opponents. Too many injuries, too many snapped forearms, too many lawsuits. Bruce felt the immediate pressure. It was like trying to hold back a hydraulic press. "Ready?" the referee asked. Both nodded. "Go!" The referee dropped his hand. Margaret applied 50% pressure. In her mind, this should have been instant, a courtesy match. Pin him gently, smile for the cameras, move on. But Bruce's arm didn't move, not toward the pin pad, not giving ground, just holding. Margaret blinked, surprised. She increased to 70%, the level she used to defeat male competitors. Bruce's arm trembled, his entire body engaged, legs, core, shoulder, everything creating structural resistance, but he held. The crowd started murmuring, not because Bruce was winning, but because he was surviving. Margaret's competitive instinct activated. She committed 90%, the level she'd used to beat the Soviet champion 3 weeks ago. Bruce's arm bent, maybe 15 degrees toward the losing position, but then something unexpected happened. Using a principle from Wing Chun, where you redirect force instead of opposing it directly, Bruce subtly shifted his wrist angle. His shoulder position changed, just slightly. Margaret's force vector partially missed its optimal line. It wasn't enough to win, but it was enough to not lose. The table began making sounds, small creaks, groans, wood under stress. The referee noticed, "Hold position." But Margaret, now fully committed and frustrated, applied 100%, her championship strength, the force that had never, ever failed her. Bruce, understanding he couldn't maintain defense much longer, made a split-second decision. Instead of resisting, he suddenly released all resistance. Margaret's force, expecting opposition, suddenly had none. She drove downward with her entire 260-pound frame, every muscle fiber firing, maximum power. Bruce redirected, not opposing, just channeling, using her force, adding his structure, creating a perpendicular angle. The combined force exceeded 4,000 pounds of concentrated pressure. The table didn't crack, it exploded. Crack! A sound like a gunshot echoed through the arena. The oak surface split lengthwise, right down the middle, directly between their locked hands. Both fighters fell forward as the table collapsed beneath them, still gripping each other, landing on shattered wood. The crowd went silent. 3 seconds of stunned, disbelieving silence. Then chaos. The referee stood frozen. In 20 years of officiating arm wrestling, he had never seen a table break. Margaret released Bruce's hand and stared at the wreckage. "I've arm wrestled for 12 years, she said, voice hollow. Competed in 40 countries, beaten over 200 opponents. Never has a table broken. What just happened?" Bruce sat up, checking his shoulder, which had absorbed significant impact. He looked at the broken table with scientific curiosity. "I think we created a force multiplication," he said calmly. "Your power moving in one direction, my structure redirecting in another. The table caught between two opposing physics." The exhibition organizers rushed over, panicking. The table had cost $1,200, imported from Sweden, specifically designed for professional competition. Margaret's coach arrived, checking her arm for injury. Bruce's friend Dave helped him up. The referee, after consulting with officials, made an announcement over the speakers. "Due to equipment failure, the match is declared null and void. No winner, no loser. However," he paused, "I've been refereeing for 20 years. I've never seen anything like what just occurred. Both competitors demonstrated extraordinary ability." Margaret approached Bruce after the initial confusion settled. She extended her hand again, different intent this time. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I assumed because you were small and from movies you had no real strength. That was ignorant. What you did, that wasn't just technique. You have real power, just concentrated differently than mine." She paused, studying him. "I've felt what 260-pound men can generate. You matched that at 140 pounds. How?" Bruce appreciated her honesty. "Your strength comes from muscle mass and leverage, years of specific training. My strength comes from whole body integration, neural efficiency, different training methods. You generate power from your arm and shoulder. I generate power from the ground up, legs, hips, core, spine, all channeling through my arm." He looked at the broken table. Different methods, similar results when properly applied. "Also, I wasn't trying to beat you. I was trying to understand the force you generate and find the technical answer to surviving it." They talked for 30 minutes after, comparing training methods, discussing physics, analyzing what had happened. Margaret admitted Bruce's technical approach had exposed a weakness in her strategy. She relied on overwhelming force, not technical positioning. Bruce acknowledged Margaret's raw strength was something he couldn't match pound for pound. His survival depended entirely on redirection, not opposition. They agreed the broken table resulted from combining her mass-generated power with his technically channeled structure, a force neither could produce individually. Sports journalists struggled to classify what they'd witnessed. Strength? Technique? Physics? All three? One reporter interviewed structural engineers, showed them photos of the break. The engineers calculated splitting oak of that thickness required over 4,000 pounds of concentrated pressure. Neither competitor could generate that alone, but their combined forces meeting at perpendicular angles at the moment of failure, that created the impossible result. The Swedish table manufacturer couldn't believe it. They sent representatives to examine the pieces, to verify. The conclusion? Extraordinary pressure applied at an unusual angle created shear force the table wasn't designed to withstand. They redesigned their tables afterward, added reinforced core structure, specifically to prevent similar failures, though they acknowledged the combination of factors that caused the break would be nearly impossible to replicate. Margaret defended her world title 3 more times, then retired undefeated in 1974. In every interview after, she mentioned the Bruce Lee match as the most educational moment of her career. "It taught me that strength without technical understanding has limitations," she said. "I started incorporating positioning into my training. It extended my championship reign." Bruce used the experience as a teaching example, demonstrating that size and strength advantages can be mitigated through technical knowledge and strategic thinking, though never completely eliminated. The broken table became legend. Arm wrestling circles told the story for decades, the day the mountain met the master, the day Swedish oak met impossible force. Scientists studying biomechanics analyzed footage years later. Bruce's body position showed complete muscle chain integration, feet to fingertips, something typically only seen in elite Olympic lifters. Margaret's force generation showed textbook mechanical advantage, mass and leverage used optimally. When these two philosophies of power collided at angles neither could fully control, the result exceeded what either intended or expected. November 21st, 1971. One table, 2 competitors, 2 philosophies of strength, 4 seconds, 50 years of legend. Margaret O'Brien proved genetic strength and dedicated training create extraordinary power. Bruce Lee proved
technical skill and body integration can compete with seemingly insurmountable physical advantages. Together, they proved something else, that when different forms of power collide at the wrong angle, even Swedish oak can't survive the force. That's not movie magic, that's physics meeting philosophy. That's 260 pounds of championship strength meeting 140 pounds of technical mastery. That's the day arm wrestling changed forever, and a table died proving it.